Caleb saw the wagon first as a dark smudge against white. Too still, too silent. Crows circled, but did not land. He pulled his horse to a stop and listened. The wind carried no sound but its own howl. The prairie stretched empty in all directions, snow-covered and merciless. He'd been riding fence land when he spotted it, 3 millas from the nearest settlement, overturned and half buried. His gut told him what he'd find before he reached it. 2 bodies lay frozen in the snow, a man and a woman. Faces turned away from each other as if death had pulled them apart. The wagon's contents were scattered clothes, a cracked mirror, a Bible with water-stained pages. Caleb knelt beside them, removed his hat, and spoke a quiet prayer, though he didn't know their names. Then he heard it. A rustle beneath the canvas tarp still lashed to the wagon bed. He moved fast, pulling the frozen fabric aside. Beneath it, wrapped in a wool blanket was a child, a girl, no more than 6 or 7, her face pale as the snow around her. Hair. Eyes were open, staring at him without tears, without sound. In her small hands, she clutched a carved wooden horse. Lord, he whispered. Her lips were blue. Her breath came shallow. She should have been dead 3 days in this cold, maybe more. But she was alive. Wolves howled in the distance. The sun was dropping fast. Caleb didn't hesitate. He wrapped her in his coat, lifted her into his arms, and carried her to his horse. She weighed almost nothing. Her eyes never left his face. He settled her in front of him on the saddle, his arm tight around her small frame. She shivered violently but made no sound. I'll be your father, he said quietly. It wasn't a question, it was a vow. He kicked his horse into motion behind them. Shadows moved through the snow wolves, closing in on the wagon. But the girl was safe now. They make sure of it. The snow began to fall harder as they rode toward his cabin. Caleb pulled her closer, shielding her from the wind. She gripped his coat with frozen fingers and watched the prairie disappear into twilight. He didn't know her name. Didn't they know where she'd come from or where her people had been heading? All he knew was this. She was alive and he would keep her that way even if it killed him. The cabin was cold as a grave when they arrived. Caleb dismounted, lifted the girl down, and carried her inside. He kicked the door shut against the wind and laid her on his bed. She was still shivering. Her skin like ice beneath his hands. He moved quickly, stoked the fire until flames roared in the hearth, pulled off her frozen boots and wet stockings, wrapped her in every blanket he owned. His hands blistered from the heat of the poker. But he didn't stop until the room glowed warm. The cabin was sparse. 1 room, stone fireplace, a table, and 2 chairs, a man's space, functional and loveless. They lived here 5 years and never once thought to make it more. He heated broth on the stove, knelt beside the bed, and tried to coax her to drink. She turned her face away. You need this, he said. Gently. Just a little. She looked at him, then truly looked, and something in her eyes made his chest tighten. Fair, deep and old. When he lifted the spoon toward her, she flinched. He froze. I won't hurt you, he said. I promise. She didn't believe him. He could see that, but she was too weak to fight. He set the broth aside and offered water instead, cooped in his callous hands. She hesitated, then drank from his palms like a wounded animal. It was enough. As the fire crackled, Caleb sat back and watched her. She clutched the carved horse against her chest. Her eyes following his every movement slowly. Her eyelids grew heavy. She fought sleep. Afraid to let go. But exhaustion won. When her breathing finally steadied, Caleb exhaled. He looked around the cabin at the dust on the shelves, the single cup by the basin. His wife's shawl still hanging on a peg by the door. They kept it there for 5 years. Unable to move it, unable to let go. His son's cradle sat in the corner covered by a sheet. I couldn't save them, he whispered to the empty room. But I can save her. He stood, added another log to the fire, and settled into the chair beside the bed. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, for the first time in years, the cabin held life. He stayed awake all night, watching over her. Morning came cold and still. Caleb woke with his neck stiff, his body aching from the chair. The girl was awake, sitting up in bed, watching him. When their eyes met, she looked away quickly. You hungrier? He asked. She didn't answer. He made her oatmeal, sweetened it with honey, and set the bowl beside her. She ate slowly, mechanically, never meeting his gaze. When she finished, he handed her his coat. We're going back to the wagon, he said, to bury your folks. Her face didn't change, but her fingers tightened on the carved horse. The ride was silent. Snow had covered most of the wreckage, but the bodies remained, frozen, and still. Caleb dismounted and began to dig. The ground fought him hard. As iron, unforgiving. His shoulders screamed, his hands bled, but he didn't stop. The girl stood on the ridge above, wrapped in his coat, watching. When the graves were ready, he laid the man and woman side by side. He found a diary in the wagon, waterlogged but readable. The woman's handwriting, faded ink. He flipped through the pages. Her name is Emma. We're running. Please, God, let us make it west. He looked up at the girl at Emma and his throat tightened. Your name's Emma, he asked. She nodded. The first real communication between them. Emma, he repeated. That's a strong name. He fashioned crosses from broken wagon planks and drove them into the frozen earth. Then he knelt, removed his hat, and spoke a prayer over the graves. Emma approached slowly, stood beside him, and placed the carved horse on her mother's mound. It was the first thing she'd let go of since he found her. Caleb waited, silent. When she was ready, he stood and offered his hand. She took it. Da rode. Back toward his cabin, but this time he turned the horse toward town instead. 8 miles south, Red Bluff sat like a scar on the prairie. He had to report the deaths. Had to register Emma's survival. Had to face the questions that would come. No turning back now, he muttered. Emma sat in front of him, his arm around her, her small body warm against his chest. The wind was gentler now, the sky clearing. Baying them, the graves faded into white. He hid, the town waited. Red Bluff watched them ride in. The main street was mud and suspicion. People stopped to stare a hard-eyed rancher and a girl too small for his saddle. Whispers started before they dismounted. Caleb ignored them. He lifted Emma down and walked her to Dr. Fletcher's clinic. The door chimed as they entered. The doctor looked up from his desk, frowned it, then softened when he saw the child. Caleb, he said. Was this? Found her by a wagon. Parent stiff. She needs checking. Dr. Fletcher nodded and gestured to the examination table. Emma hesitated, but Caleb's hand on her shoulder steadied her. The doctor was gentle, his movements careful. He checked her temperature, listened to her lungs, examined the bruises on her arms and legs. Malnourished, he said quietly. Some old bruising likely from the crash, but she'll recover. He looked at Caleb. You did good bringing her in and keeping her, Caleb said. Dr. Fletcher's eyebrows rose. Keeping her? That's right. Before the doctor could respond, the door opened. Sheriff Haynes stepped inside, hat in hand, eyes sharp. He looked from Caleb to Emma and back again. Heard you found a girl. The sheriff said. Edith. Where did she come from? Wagon overturned 3 millas north. Parents froze to death. He buried them this morning. And you just took her? Caleb's jaw tightened. Was I supposed to leave her? You got any proof who she is? Any papers? Found her mother's diary. Name is Emma. He pulled the stained book from his coat and handed it over. Sheriff Haynes flipped through it, frowning. Says here they were running from someone. Dates, maybe worse. You sure you want to get involved? Already I'm the sheriff sided. Caleb, you can't just take in a child. There is procedures. Orphanage in Cheyenne. She's not going to an orphanage. You got legal right to her. He got the right that I saved her life. That count. Emma stepped closer to Caleb, gripped his hand. Her voice was small but clear. Don't leave me. The room went silent. Sheriff Haynes looked at her. Then at Caleb. This ain't simple. People will talk. Let them. Before the sheriff could argue. The door opened again. Mrs. Dawson stepped inside, storekeeper widow sharp as a tack. She looked at the scene, assessed it in seconds, and folded her arms. Caleb Hayes has been in this town 10 years, she said. Never caused trouble, never lied. If he says he'll care for that girl, he will. Better his home than some cold institution where she's just a number. Sheriff Haynes rubbed his face. Mrs. Dawson, I'm just saying what's true, Sheriff. You know it, though. The sheriff looked at Caleb for a long moment. Finally, he said. All right. But if there's any trouble, any questions, you come to me. Understood. Understood. They left the clinic and walked to the general store. Mrs. Dawson followed her presence a shield against the stairs. Caleb bought Emma a dress, boots, and a peppermint stick. She clutched the candy-like treasure. On the ride home, the sun was setting, painting the prairie gold. Emma leaned back against Caleb's chest, hair breathing even. Thank you, she whispered. Caleb's throat tightened. You're welcome, Emma. It was the first time she'd spoken more than 2 words. He held her a little tighter as they rode into the fading light. Spring came slow, but it came. The snow melted, revealing green beneath. Meadowlarks returned, singing from fence posts. The creek ran cold and clear. Caleb's cabin, once a place to hide from the world, began to feel like something more. Emma learned to gather eggs without fear. She fed the chickens, talking to them in a soft voice Caleb strained to hear. She watched him work mending fence, hauling water, branding calves, and slowly she began to help. One morning, she handed him nails without being asked. You're quick, he said. She smiled. It was small, tentative, but real. Caleb taught her to ride. She sat in front of him at first, his arms around her, guiding the rest. Then one day, she asked to try alone. He led the horse in slow circles while she gripped the saddle. Her face determined. When she didn't fall, she laughed. Caleb hadn't heard laughter in 5 years. The sound cracked something open inside him. One evening, they sat by the fire after supper. Emma drew pictures in the dirt near the hearthstick figures. A house, a horse. Caleb whittled at a new charro leg, his knife steady. Were you a papa before? Emma asked suddenly. Caleb's hand stilled. He looked at her, then at the fire. Yes, he said quietly. My wife and son. They died 5 winters. Ago fever took them both in 3 days. Emma was silent for a moment. Then she asked, did you fail them? The question hit like a fist. He couldn't save them. So, yes, I did. Emma set down her stick. She walked over and placed her small hand on his. You didn't fail me. Caleb couldn't speak. He just nodded, his throat too tight for words. She sat beside him, leaning against his shoulder. Can I call you Pop? He swallowed hard. It'd be honor. But that night, peace shattered. A boy from town rode up at dusk with a message from Mrs. Dawson. A stranger had been asking questions about a wagon, about a missing girl. The man wore a city coat and carried legal papers. Caleb read the note twice, then burned it in the fire. Emma was already asleep. He stood over her, watching her breathe, and felt the cold weight of fear settle in his chest. Someone was coming for her. The man arrived 3 days later. Caleb was splitting wood when he heard the horse. He set down the axe and stepped in front of the cabin door. Emma was inside playing with a doll Mrs. Dawson had given her. The rider wore a fine coat, polished boots, and a cruel smile. He dismounted slowly, surveying the ranch with distaste. You Caleb Hayes? The man asked. I'm named Silas Trent. I'm here for my niece. Caleb's blood went cold. Your niece? That's right, Emma, her mother was my sister. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. Got the legal claim right here. Blood relation. I'm taking her back to St. Louis. Like hell you are. Salas's smile widened. You got no say in this, Ranchero. Sis family. Sis been with me those months. Where were you when she was freezing to death? Didn't they know she was alive till last week? Soon as I heard, I came. I glanced at the cabin. She in there. Caleb stepped forward, blocking his path. You're not taking her. I don't need your permission. Before Caleb could respond, Emma appeared in the doorway. She saw Salas and went pale. She ran to Caleb, gripped his arm, hair. Voice shaking. Don't let him take me. Silas laughed. Emma, sweetheart, you don't even know me, but I'm your uncle. You're real family. You're not my family, she whispered. He is. Silu's expression hardened. This is touching. Really, the law is the law. Sheriff already knows I'm here. Court hearings set for those weeks. Bring her to town or I'll have the law drag her out. He mounted his horse, tipped his hat mockingly, and rode away. Emma whiz. Shaking. Caleb knelt, held her shoulders. I won't let him take you. You promise? I promise. But as he watched Salas disappear down the trail, Caleb knew the truth. He had no legal right to her. No papers, no claim, just love. And love didn't stand up in court. The lawyer was honest. At least it trumps charity, he said, leaning back in his chair. Unless you can prove he's unfit and greed isn't enough, you'll lose. Caleb sat across from him, hat in his hands. So I do nothing. Adoption takes months. A has immediate custody rights. I'm sorry, Caleb. MRS Dawson found him outside the lawyer's office. Grown, she said. Take her west. Change your names. Ella help. Caleb shook his head. I won't teach her to hide from the truth. Then what will you do? I don't know. He rode to the graveyard where his wife and son lay. The headstones were weathered, the grass overgrown. He knelt between them and spoke to the silence. I'm not strong enough, not smart enough. What if I lose her like I lost you? The wind gave no answer. When he returned to the cabin, Emma was gone. Panic seized him. He called her name, searched the barn, the creek. Finally, he found her by the river sitting on a rock. Her knees pulled to her chest. She didn't look at him when he approached. You're leaving me, she said. Her voice was flat, hollow. Everyone leaves me. Caleb sat beside her. I'm not leaving you. Then why'd you go to town? Why did you talk to that man? Because I'm trying to fight for you. You can't fight him. He has the law. Ella fight the law. Then she finally looked at him, tears streaming. How? Caleb didn't have an answer. So he told her the truth. I don't know, Emma, but I won't stop trying. I need you to fight, though. How? Tell them in court. Tell them you choose me. She was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. When they returned to the cabin, a dozen people were waiting. MRS Dawson, Dr. Fletcher. Families from neighboring ranches. They held lanterns. Their faces serious. We signed a petition, MRS Dawson said, holding up a paper. Every one of us will testify. You're not alone in this, Caleb. Caleb's throat tightened. He looked at the faces, people he'd barely spoken to in 5 years, now standing with him. Thank you, he managed. Emma stood beside him, her hand in his. For the first time since Salas arrived, Caleb felt something other than fear. He felt hope. The courtroom was packed. They sat up in the church hall, the only space big enough. Judge Whitmore sat at the front, stern-faced and sharpie. Salas Trent sat on the left with his lawyer, confident and smug. Caleb and Emma sat on the right. Mrs. Dawson beside them. The room smelled of wood polish and sweat. Junto Whitmore banged his gavel. This is a custody hearing. Silas Trent claims blood relation to the minor. Emma Caleb Hayes claims guardianship by care and rescue. We hear both sides. Salas's lawyer stood. Your Honor, the law is clear. Mr. Trent is Emma's uncle. Her only living blood relative. He has a home, financial means, and legal standing. Mr. Hayes is an unrelated bachelor with no claim except sentiment. Junto Whitmore looked at Caleb. Mr. Hayes, you have representation. No, sir, just the truth. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Mrs. Dawson stood first. Your Honor, I've known Caleb Hayes 10 years. He's honest, hard-working, and decent. When Emma was dying, he saved her. When the law did nothing, he gave her a home. That counts for something. Dr. Fletcher testified next. She was malnourished, traumatized, shutting down. Now she's healthy, happy, thriving. That's not luck. That's love. Even Sheriff Haynes stood. I admit, I doubted him, but he's kept his word. Treated her right. I've seen no cause for concern. Silas' lawyer waved a hand. Touching, but irrelevant. The law favors family. Junto Whitmore leaned forward. Mr. Trent, why do you want custody? Silas smiled. She's my sister's child. My blood. I owe it to her memory. And the land did. Silas' smile faltered. What did? The judge held up a paper. Found in the wagon wreckage worth $3,000. Funny you didn't mention it. The room went silent. That's incidental, Silas said. Emma stood suddenly. Her voice shook but didn't break. He doesn't love me. He wants the money. Silas's lawyer tried to object, but Judge Whitmore silenced him. The child will speak. Emma looked at Caleb, then at the judge. He said he'd be my father. He is. I choose him. Silas is married. A child doesn't choose. Why not? Emma's voice rose. I'm the one you're fighting over. Don't I matter? The room erupted in murmurs. Junto Whitmore banged his gavel. Mr. Hayes, the judge said, why should I give her to you? Caleb stood. His voice was steady. Because I don't see her as property. I don't see her as a burden. I see her as my daughter. Every day I'll prove it through work, through love, through showing up. That's what a father does. The judge was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Temporary custody granted to Caleb Hayes. Formal adoption process begins immediately. Mr. Trent's claim is dismissed due to evidence of financial motive. The room exploded in cheers. Emma launched herself into Caleb's arms, sobbing. He held her tight, his own eyes wet. Silas stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Mrs. Dawson squeezed Caleb's shoulder. You did it. Caleb looked down at Emma, her face pressed against his chest. We did it. Spring turned to summer, and the cabin became a home. Emma woke Caleb one morning by shaking his shoulder. Pa, the chickens are out again. Granit rubbed his eyes, and smiled. Then let's get them. They chased the birds through the yard laughing until everyone was back in the coop. Afterward, they sat on the porch, catching their breath. The adoption papers sat on the table inside, stamped and official. Emma was his daughter now, legally. Finally forever. Caleb spent the afternoon carving. When he finished, he handed Emma a wooden horse larger than the first, more detailed, smoother. This one's for moving forward, he said. Emma turned it over in her hands, then smiled. She went inside and placed the old horse on a shelf beside her mother's diary. To remember where I came from, she set the new horse on her bed. And where I'm going. Represe the script in tan Mexican Spanish and make religion and remove all haram can't act from. Script according to Islam.